we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke. Yeah.
Man, imagine if we get 4 more years of that. Joining me now, my friend James Lindsay, someone I really lean on for a lot of wisdom when it comes to fighting these dirty communists. He's going to talk to us a little bit about that word and other things. He's the founder of newdiscourses.com, author of really a bunch of freaking good books. But James, okay, so I actually have very little faith that Dome knows what that word woke means, but I bet you do. What does it mean to all the people who use it?
I sure do. I think she knows what it means too. And I think that's why she's telling people to be, woker or wokest, as long as they're more woke rather than less woke. In other words, continue to, as Mao would have it, as Mao Zedong would have had it in China, to continue to do your ideological remolding, particularly among the intellectuals, so that they can adopt the communist viewpoint. What woke means is having adopted, this is the technical term, adopted a critical consciousness of reality, which is to say that you understand that not just social reality, but our entire experience in life is contoured by systems of power that are described by theories like critical race theory for systemic racism and queer theory for systemic transphobia and homophobia, feminism, ableism, the whole list of these isms and phobias we've all gotten used to, which are actually Maoist identity politics reformulated to be applied to the United States context. So being woke means having awakened to the belief that reality operates this way, society actually is contoured this way, and that you have to not only be aware of it, but to join in solidarity as the oppressed class or the friends or the allies of the oppressed class and fight to overthrow that system, which for Karl Marx meant through bloody revolution.
James, I don't think a lot of people understand that Mao did not something similar to what modern Democrats do. He did the exact same thing when it comes to dividing people by race and religion and pitting one against the other. People just aren't aware. They look at China and assume everyone's just, Chinese, but they had a million different subgroups in there too, and Mao was masterful at doing what modern Democrats have done.
That's right. Besides the normal kind of subgroups, whether it's business people or intellectuals or government agents or peasants or workers that you have in a society, China had 56 races. The Han Chinese are the biggest race and the most dominant race, and they actually created a fake critical race theory, or an early critical race theory. Mao called it the theory of Han chauvinism, and the idea was that to go around and tell all of the minority races, the 55 minority races, that they had to live a certain way to count as Chinese was actually Han chauvinism. It was the Han race imposing Han supremacy on the people, and that had to be combated. Instead, what was going to be done was that he would go around and use that agitation to lead them into understanding that their indigenous beliefs, their indigenous identities, were actually best served by socialism and by communism. And this program didn't actually originate with Mao. We like to blame Mao. We can say that woke is American Maoism with a high fidelity, but it actually originated with Lenin and Stalin in 1921, 1922, 1923. It's funny to read them today. They talk about how you had to infiltrate into the backwards peoples, the backwards populations of Russia. That's what they called them, the backwards people, which was these kind of minority races throughout Russia and through the other Soviet states. And what you had to do was go in and show them that, in fact, their true culture was going to be best represented by communism. It was to indigenize them as socialists. The program was, I can't remember the Russian, but something like Korentsaya or something like that. It literally translates into inclusion. And then they had another one that was Robins of, I don't speak Russian, but it translates as diversity. Look up the Russian word for diversity. These programs came straight from Lenin and Stalin, were incorporated and employed by Mao, and they were adopted by the Western Marxists in the 1960s and 70s, who were almost all Maoist, and incorporated into the Western identity politics scam that we're all dealing with today. So if the short version of that is that Lenin and Stalin invented DEI, and that's easily provable.
James, how many modern Democrats today, obviously we're going to guess on this, but how many modern Democrats are these committed communists that they're out there destroying? That's what they're doing. They're doing it on purpose. And how many are honestly just useful idiots? Dad was always a Democrat, and I don't know, I want to be tolerant. And what are the percentages here? I argue repeatedly, it's actually a small percentage of the really, really evil, nefarious people, and the others are just brain-dead lemmings going along with it.
Yeah, I think in politics, it's probably higher than in other domains. It's probably closer to, 20, maybe as many as 20%, but that leaves 80% are actually just kind of morons who've bought into the metaphysics and into the worldview and the operational praxis of communism and think that they're not doing communism, but they are. But in the media, I think it's a much smaller percentage. In fact, I think most journalists are kind of stupid and think that they're just kind of, sophisticated and elite. And so I saw Matt Iglesias today on Twitter talking about, oh, my grandfather was a communist. We just grew up with that. And so that's how I know Kamala is not a communist. And he has this whole vibe like he's just better than communism. But he's tweeted repeatedly in the past that he wants the entirety of the American politics just to move left. So it doesn't really matter how, which is a communist viewpoint. So he's imbibed it, but he thinks he's better than it because he's actually just stupid. And I think that this is kind of a lower percentage in the media, a higher percentage in politics. The universities, I would bet you it's close to 30 to 50% are outright Marxists and know they are.
James, one of my frustrations watching the right try to combat this, or sometimes not even try to combat this, is you see how committed the communists are to causes. They'll dump Joe Biden and pick up Dome, and they would dump Dome in a heartbeat if they thought it served their purposes, because they're all about a cause. We're facing a system, whereas the right seems far more obsessed with individuals. Who's our presidential candidate? Who's my senator? When the cause should be what matters. We can't defeat a cause with individuals.
Well, the problem is that people don't understand that communists are not political actors. I mean, they act in the political realm, but what they are is religious fanatics. They are waging the communist equivalent, which they call revolution, but the communist equivalent of jihad on our society, and they're completely committed to that. A, because it's their fanatical, intolerant, militarized faith, but also B, because they know they've crossed the Rubicon. Most of these people are going to jail if the lie starts coming undone, and they know they're going to jail, so they have no option but to push forward. So a lot of people don't understand how fervently committed they are. Now, what I'm excited about with the Harris Waltz ticket that we're looking at right now is I think that it's going to open the door for the first honest conversation in the 21st century about communism in the United States and across the West, because they're so obviously so radical. And Kamala has said so many things that are so nakedly communist. I've gone viral multiple times in the last week just over her famous adage that we can see what is, we are able to see what can be unburdened by what has been, which is a communist. It's the beating heart of the communist ethos. The historical conditions of our age condition us to who we are. That's how Marx would have phrased it. But men make their own history. So if we enlighten to socialism or to communism or to Marxism, then we don't have to be burdened by the weight of history, the nightmarish weight of history. We can go strike out in a new direction. And we can have a qualitative change, as the usual language, in the fate, in the quality of men's lives. And so what you have is textbook communism coming out of a Ditzy Valley Girl sounding mouth, but she's actually a savvy operator with a communist professor for a father. So I suspect she actually knows what she's talking about, which doesn't change the fact that she's a low-level functionary with high-level operators controlling her, controlling Tim Walz, and controlling the Democrat machine, which is what we're actually up against.